In the last section, we completed our login form, but now we need to make sure that when a user logs in, we actually do something about it. The function onLoginSuccess that we implemented right here is called whenever a user successfully logs in. So we could use that as a place to notify the rest of our app that, hey, the user just signed in, show a different screen, or do whatever you want to do. That would definitely be one possible solution. However, there's another solution that we can use as well, one that is a little bit more magic, but is certainly going to lead to some simpler code. So let's talk about what that second solution is. All over the place, we've been calling this method on the Firebase library of firebase.auth, right? We've been calling this thing right here. And we've seen two methods tied to it, right? So when I call firebase.auth, clearly it returns an object with some number of methods, like sign in with email and password, and create user with email and password as well. So that object has some number of methods tied to it. This object that gets returned from firebase.auth has another method called onAuthStateChanged. This is a handler for an event. We can pass it a function that will be called whenever the authentication state of our user changes, like if they log in or they log out. I suggest that we use this as our place for figuring out whether or not the user is logged in or logged out at any point in time and update our app appropriately. Okay, so we're going to use this new event handler that is on the firebase.auth object to figure out whether or not the user is signed in or signed out. So to do so, we need a place to locate this code, right? We got to add some code in our application that's going to implement this event handler that I just mentioned. I think the best place to do that will be inside of our app component, and most specifically, component will mount. So inside of component will mount, I'm going to add in a function call. So we'll call firebase.auth.onAuthStateChanged. And this is a function, an event handler right here that accepts a function. So whenever the user signs in or signs out, as many times as they might do as we have our application opened, this fat-arrow function right here will be called. So if the user signs in, great, we will know inside this function. If they sign out, fantastic, that's just as good. This function right here, the fat-arrow function, will be called with a single argument that we're going to call user. So when the authentication state changes, if the user is signed in, this user argument right here will be an object that represents the user, but if they signed out, it will be null or undefined. So we can look at this argument right here to decide whether or not the user has signed in when this onAuth state changes. So I feel like the kind of key thing here that's kind of confusing about this concept is that this is one event handler right here for handling either signing in or signing out. So either one, our fat-arrow function right here will be called. And it's solely based on the presence of this argument right here that we're going to figure out whether or not the user just signed in or signed out. Now I want to pause for a second and look back at our mock-up for this application. We had said that when the user is not signed in, we should show them the login form over here on the left-hand screen. And that's definitely what we're doing right now. We're always showing them the login screen. But as soon as they are logged in, we want to show them not the form anymore. We want to show them just a button to sign out. So when a user signs in, we want to show them the sign out button. And then when they are not, I want to show them the login form. Put another way, we need to conditionally show some JSX on the device, right? We want to conditionally do one thing or the other, and we want to re-render between the two. So hopefully that sounds familiar. This is something we just did with our spinner in the login form, and we solved it by using component level state. So we will add a new piece of state to our application, specifically the app component, that will track whether or not the user is logged in. So we will add a new piece of state in here. So let's initialize our state object. I think that we will we will create a new property here called logged in. And by default, we'll let logged in be just false. So by default, I'm going to assume you are not logged into our application. So now inside of our callback right here, we will look at the user argument to it. And if there is a user, we'll say this.setState logged in is true. So now you are logged in. else this dot set state logged in false, like so. Okay, so either you are logged in or you are not logged in. We could probably condense this to just like set the user object on our state object, right? We could, oh, and I got a little bit of a typo there. I apologize. I want that to be a capital I, logged in, like so. So we could, you might be thinking, Stephen, why aren't we just setting the user object on our state? Well, there is a good reason for that, and we'll see exactly why very shortly. Okay, so our app component right now will now understand whether or not the user is currently signed in or signed out to our application. It does this by watching this onAuth state changed callback from the Firebase library. So whenever the user toggles between one or the other, it will call this fat arrow function, and we will flip our state variable of logged in from either true to false. So like true to false, true, false, true, false. Let's use this piece of state now in the next section to figure out what content we want to show on the screen.